G'day guys, this is CW. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to discuss the challenges that were had in the previous year, and then also sort of the challenges that Ergo and the greater sort of economic space face in the year forward. We're going to discuss this with Joseph Armeanio. How are you, mate?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to the video.
Yeah, so obviously we sort of had a couple of issues in regards to challenges in the Ergo ecosystem over the past year. Do you want to touch on a couple of those?
Sure. I think that when we started this year, we had a couple of bottlenecks. That was just probably the result of a smaller community. And what I've seen is as we grow, number one, those bottlenecks become more apparent. The community calls it out. And we've, I think, done a great job in terms of, kind of decentralizing, adding new instances. Wallets are a good example. If we go back a year, we had a single wallet that didn't really have the best user experience, and that was a handicap in terms of what dApp developers were working on. And so we have since seen multiple new instances of wallets developed in parallel that are pretty stable. They're running well, and they're giving a much different user experience to the end user. I think that probably was our biggest bottleneck, that we really are kind of in a different era of Ergo versus where we were a year ago. I would say the dependency that's left that the community and developers are working on is the Explorer, which now we have a couple of different builds in parallel. We're seeing more applications that are hosting their own databases, caching information and pulling information from their own private instances versus repeated calls to public infrastructure, and that's great to see. I hope that a lot of that gets open sourced, and we ultimately put together a cookbook in terms of building databases around dApps, and really make the developer adoption experience as easy and seamless as possible. That kind of builds on the core essence of Ergo, which is open source. So the more open source builds there are out there, and the more thorough the documentation and hopefully organized and accessible, anyone that comes into the ecosystem from anywhere else will have the ability to hop on and have the resources to spend a lot less time looking, for examples of what to do. They'll just have, sources there that they can work from.
Yeah, those sort of two limitations that you just mentioned there in regards to wallets, but then also the Explorer instances, they kind of go hand in hand a little, especially with like a desktop wallet not being able to sort of query the blockchain. It was quite a sort of contentious issue there for a while, not being able to sort of utilize the DEX properly and things like that. I think once Nautilus came along, and then SafeW with their wallet dApp connector, being able to jump on there was a really big sort of move forward in regards to usability for Ergo.
Yeah, and I hope we see the same development this next year with the full node. I know that we're still working on the rapid sync using NepoPals, but once that is live and operational, I think that it's really worth looking at a desktop full node wallet that brings a lot of bells and whistles with it, has the ability to potentially play around with off-chain infrastructure in a seamless way, and move towards the green button experience, right? Even with like the new Mixer build that's still in development, I think getting to the point where it's so easy your grandma can use it is like the ideal end goal for the user side.
Yeah, it's just breaking down those barriers. So then the average Joe sorry to use that pun there, can utilize the infrastructure that's being built out. It's great.
Yeah, and so both sides, the developer side and the user side, I think we can structure things in a way that just makes adoption easier. And then, the research and development side is always interesting as we get into layer 2 solutions and potentially putting together information in terms of what makes sense where, and just building an open source documentation around how to implement that, and hopefully even having a lot of clarity in terms of assumptions. I would love to see that more in the Ergo ecosystem, where dApps kind of do their own education in terms of what assumptions they want their users to know.
Yeah, by all means, especially around DeFi as well. We saw sort of the unraveling in the crypto sort of macro environment in regards to sort of people over leveraging and sort of not knowing their assumptions and diving sort of aping in, probably is the right terminology, into sort of projects and things like that.
I would say that, like, let's take USDT as an example, right? You had a lot of crypto media that was pumping that for whatever reason. You had a lot of exchanges that were rolling it out, and there was not a lot of due diligence. So I don't think that it's just like degeneracy and aping. I think that was a systematic failure of, people that are supposed to bring in new users to actually educate them about what the hell they're selling.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of taken advantage of people, isn't it, really? Promising a product, and obviously look what sort of happened.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, they can throw their arms up and say, well, I'm just reporting the news. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
It really is.
Unfortunately, people's lives get wrecked and financially sort of destroyed. It's quite a sad thing to see.
Yeah, I think that the best remedy for that is a community that has a very strong push to say, what are the assumptions here? And so even if something does fail, right? You know why it failed, when it's going to fail. And there's no like, oh my goodness, I thought this was solid, right? Even blockchain, we can say we're proof of work. So as soon as, hash rate gets above 51%, we have an issue, right? That doesn't necessarily mean the vulnerability is going to be exploited, but it's potentially, possible. And so it's funny how on a network layer, everyone knows about a 51% attack, right? That's like basic crypto, assumption. But then when you get into DeFi, you get into contracts, you get into builds, that kind of goes to the wayside.
Yeah, promised percentage returns, which it's all well and good when things are moving in the right direction, obviously being up in this case. But when sort of the markets turn on you, then things can unravel pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that. And it's kind of created a lot of uncertainty, let's just say, in the industry. Luckily, Ergo is small enough and we're not, let's just say, backed by any large VCs from start. So we kind of are, there's a saying that I don't even really like. It's like, we're all in the same boat, which I think that's kind of a stupid saying. I think we're all in the same storm in different boats. And, some people's boats are nicer and others are struggling. But that point aside, we're all in like the same storm. There's been some major players with huge portfolios that, we're basically like, cowboys at a poker table, had way too much at risk, and they got caught with their pants down. And so now there's potentially millions, billions of money that is owed that has no backing, and potential liquidations and buyouts, and there's a potential for kind of a cascading effect throughout our industry, which in some way I say good, that people that come into decentralized ecosystems and like pretend that they're anything different than the legacy systems that we're trying to escape, they suffer, versus actual decentralized protocols are still running. They're generally doing okay throughout all of this. And so it really gives our industry and what actual DeFi is about a lot of credibility. But unfortunately, that's not how it's going to be seen by, I would say, the existing media and the general public, because they don't understand the difference between decentralized finance and one guy that's deploying liquidity saying this is a decentralized finance protocol, when it's like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of a reputation damage caused in regards to the sort of the crypto industry as a whole there. Obviously, you have the big players and the centralized sort of actors there sort of promising all these big returns and then sort of all unraveling, but then it might not sort of, their morals and principles may not align with sort of where crypto sort of stems from.
Yeah, you have a lot of people that spin up a project and they try to be the hand of the market.
Yeah.
Just is what it is. We get shit sometimes because they'll say like, oh, Ergo's volume is much lower relative to everybody else. And it's because, the market making that we do is just literally bare bones requirements that exchanges ask for in order to be listed.
Yeah, it's not, obviously you see some quite high numbers for projects with relatively low market caps. And then the volume sort of on comparison, sort of say Ergo and compare our market cap to theirs, maybe it's quite a large difference in regards to the volume being pumped through.
Yeah, building an organic economy, whether decentralized or otherwise, is painful and slow. That takes time for businesses to develop, for customers to use and adapt the tools, for organic adoption to occur is a process. Because it takes infrastructure, and that infrastructure takes time. It takes applications, which then have backends and servers, and there's a lot of complexity to actually building that organically versus trying to buy it, right? And there is a overemphasis in this space, in my opinion, in terms of trying to buy something or even sell things that don't exist, right? And at least me, when I get in front of the camera and I talk to the Ergo community, I hope people realize I'm a terrible salesman in that sense. Where, it's not something that I think you can, you can't sell something and not deliver and not have a problem. There's no integrity there.
Exactly. I think that's the word, integrity. If you sort of bullshit the community, I think a lot of people will see through that. And obviously you've lost a little bit of trust there, or quite a lot of trust. I think honesty and keeping principles at the heart of the community is massive.
Yeah, and you can do that in the right market conditions, I think. Because then it gives some illusion that reality is following the narrative. But when things are, let's just say, a little bit more, there's not the same liquidity flowing into the space. There's a lot more scrutiny, and looking at projects and what did they deliver versus what did they say. And then I think that bear markets are really good for consolidating, getting out of technical debt, building really interesting frameworks. And then to some degree, when you have these inflow of users, it's like try to keep the servers from melting.
Yeah, that's very well put.
And the other thing is always hope that you have the documentation, because new users are somewhat like water to some degree. If there's any cracks, they're going to find it. And having the community able to reinforce and help users that may need assistance, and having tutorials and information out there is huge.
Yeah, we've sort of used this analogy a couple of times. It's sort of from a game development point of view, you might have a wall somewhere, and then the game developer thinks the user will never sort of try and walk through that. It's just sort of the last thing that sort of would go through someone's mind. And what do you know? Some users jump through the wall and corrupted and exploited who knows what, and run away with the thing. In regards to sort of building throughout bear markets and things, what I like to sort of use as an analogy is like from a construction point of view, obviously you have to do a lot of the groundworks, do your plumbing, electrical, obviously then, or you build all your foundations, your concrete slabs, and all that ties up a lot of time. But sort of once you're out of the ground, the walls and everything, windows, everything sort of just sort of speeds up really exponentially. I sort of like to sort of use that in regards to sort of development and the growth that comes from that.
Yeah, so it's not the greatest macro crypto conditions. We have the funds that potentially are going to get liquidated. We have some exchanges that are potentially in trouble. But the reality is this industry is around. And I do think that looking at where Bitcoin started, like block one, we're on the verge of another bailout. Macroeconomic policy in terms of central banking has gotten more and more and more absurd. And, the reality is, everybody's kind of been watching central banks for the last 2 years. And, it's somewhat similar to what happened with this. We had a massive run with low rates and free money. And now we've kind of pulled a different lever and, interest rates are rising. You have deleveraging occurring in the economy. You have, housing rates going up. You have fuel and energy costs going through the roof. Food is increasing. So I think ultimately the actual public trust in the existing legacy system is probably lower than when Bitcoin started. And I think throughout this whole past couple of years has further eroded. So having systems that potentially protect people from debasement and have clear economic rules that, in my opinion, should always be transparent risk assumptions, offers a great deal of value to people that are just at the mercy of, a very, very small group of people that determine this price of money in our world.
Yeah, that's quite unfortunate. Just got the policies that a couple of people think, and obviously they can sway that with their opinion, and obviously it can bring a lot of hurt to the regular people throughout the world. It's quite trying times in the macro environment. Obviously that sort of has a big influence in regards to sort of the legacy markets, but then also crypto.
Sure.
In regards to sort of, you touched on central banks there and CBDCs, that sort of ties into the crypto side of things. Which way do you sort of see that sort of heading? There's a number of risks in that front.
Inevitably, I think that the availability and power that digital centralized money offers is too juicy that it's not going to be exploited. There's zero, in my opinion, there's zero chance that it's going to be like a force for quote unquote, freedom and good. I think it will make things more efficient potentially, which may have some economic benefits. But if you look at the ability to surveil everyone, potentially for life, the ability to remote burn people's money because you may not like what they did or said, or how they act, or, how many beers did you have? That's going to be an extra, tax. Yeah. The ability to set what you can buy, what items are, available within what certain credit limits, like that type of economic tinkering never works, because ultimately I do think that, having the ability to be sovereign and create in your own way, use your own creativity, use your own power, use your own passion in your life is a much, much, much more productive means of living, and also a more enjoyable means of living than just having, some bureaucrat that's running, checks of what exactly you can't do, when, where, how, that type of micromanagement. That's why I live in the mountains.
Yeah, it's quite scary. Obviously, you touched on being able to sort of have that program, or potentially having that programmability in regards to CBDCs. What I sort of find scary there is, like you said, having that surveillance side of things, but then also the limitation in regards to, say, you're only allowed to purchase X amount of beer this week and then we're going to tax it, or you're not allowed to smoke, or you're from a certain economic environment where it might not sort of be inducive to be able to purchase something that at your own free will that you might enjoy. So I think that sort of takes and rips the heart out of a community.
No, it certainly makes life a lot less enjoyable, in my opinion. So, in terms of CBDCs, do I think they're coming? Yes. Do I think they're dangerous? Absolutely. And to some degree, it's like, if I step back and I'm like, okay, well, we have this P2P money, right? There is a popular, push in our industry to say, okay, well, we need to integrate with, banks, and we need to be compliant with everything, and we need to kind of sell the open and resistant principles of our industry for some sort of adoption. And then I have to wonder, if a central bank digital currency comes, what's the point of that? I think ultimately having decentralized, unstoppable frameworks that offer clear assumptions on the profit side, but also have like counter economic tools to where people can use these systems without having a high cost overhead of actually using crypto as a speculation versus just a unit of account, is super valuable. You get into LETs and circular economies and, more local tools that people could potentially use to collectively work together to get through hard times.
Yeah. Another thing in regards to the CBDCs also, I think if it does go down that sort of road of being programmable, it'll have a lot of eyes on it. And we've seen a lot of sort of exploits in regards to sort of the blockchain industry and that side of things. I dare say there'll be a few people lining up to sort of get their eyes into that sort of things, because obviously it's just a big power pool. So obviously they won't want to not have a CBDC, say for US dollars or whatever sort of central bank they want to distribute. It's just a big sort of power and control thing or the way I see it.
Yeah, me too. And, if I had to put money on the table, I would say that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
If it were red or black, I would bet on whichever color that's going to be versus, we end up having like a kumbaya moment and suddenly, we're not being surveilled and it's just too juicy. It's too much power.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately where we're going. And I think that's one of the bigger values of our industry longer term, is not just, how much fiat is token X worth. It's what kind of value does that create and produce that you can use in reality that's not pegged to fiat. It's getting actually away from that system. I know there's a lot of old Bitcoin memes out there with like Morpheus, where he's like, Neo, once this is adopted, you won't have to. I still think that's the way, versus saying, okay, let's package it as a product and become a high risk asset in Wall Street, and let them in essence start to exercise price control.
Yeah,
because they will end up owning the market if that happens. And so, okay, maybe people will make money during that adoption process, but I think the long-term potential is just hollowed out in that path. So I tend to lean more towards the let's create an unstoppable, fair, transparent, global ecosystem that you can build an economy on, that is more stable, and the assumptions are better understood than saying, okay, the wizards from the Fed are going to go talk in their meeting, and then they're going to come out and read a pre-prepared statement. And now how many million people are affected, and how much power do you have over even voluntarily, using that or not? You're just trapped in that system.
Yep. And then they can just change the goalposts or move the goalposts to wherever they like. Having that predefined sort of playing field and know where you stand, you can jump in and sort of interact with the community or the economy, I should say, wherever you like. I think that sort of ties into where we're sort of heading in regards to regulation. There's been a little bit of talk in regards to sort of regulation in the US side of things about sort of what's a commodity, what's a security. And then obviously with the DeFi sort of unraveling, I think there's a big spotlight in regards to regulation at this stage.
Yeah. And you know what, to be honest, if you look at the industry, there is a lot of practices that are deceptive, manipulative, and just, designed to take people's money. We have rug pulls, we have things that people raise money, they never actually even build anything. We have a lot of greed.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of people that are looking for speculative returns, and that is the perfect setup to have someone run off with your money, right? So I can look at that and say, okay, well, I certainly don't agree with a lot of the practices in our industry that I see. But then when you're talking about building a P2P system, peer-to-peer, and then it is somewhat true that it's like, okay, well, if you're gonna play that game, you need to go in with the assumption there's not a referee.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a part of why open code, transparent assumptions are so important, because absent that, people are going to get hurt because one of the P's took advantage of the other P, and they're going to go try to pull in a third party referee. And I think ultimately, if you read the first bit of the Bitcoin white paper, it's about creating P2P money without the need for a third party. And so now we have, some people in our space that are actively calling for third parties because they think it's going to financially benefit them. And then you have others that are trying to, convince the ref that, hey, this guy didn't cross the line, but this guy did. And, there's a lot of just things I find ridiculous. Like if you're focused on real P2P money, why is that the focus? We should be focused on the technology and how to deliver it in a way that assumptions are clear. Because ultimately, if we could deliver systems that are peer-to-peer and they actually protect users, right? They deliver value, they're useful, versus trying to have very foggy assumptions and overselling, sometimes just error. It doesn't look well. Sometimes I don't like the space that I work in, if I'm totally honest with you. I find it a little depressing that I can see the potential of P2P, and I do see people that are very attached to open source frameworks and building out solid, useful tools, and then other things that are just, it's a way to grab cash. I think the cash grab is way too popular.
Yeah, it's too juicy, I think, as well. Obviously, I think the economy sort of ties into this as well. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I think people are in the position where they think that their only way out is to sort of jump on the next sort of big thing and try and ride the wave. It's quite sad that the sort of economy's in that state for them to sort of, I think, be trodden on or trodden down on that far to be able to sort of have that mindset where the only way out.
The only way I'm ever going to afford a house. The only time I'm ever going to afford a house if I just ape into some crazy stuff and use leverage and risk, and that usually leaves them worse off than when they entered. I mean, you always have a few winners when it comes to like rampant speculation and extreme risk tolerance. Let's just call it that. You always have a couple of winners. Somebody wins the lottery every week, but then when you boil it down to odds, it's a little bit more sobering.
Yeah. So there's some economic headwinds that we're sort of going to be sailing through for this year to come, both on the sort of legacy sort of macro side, but then the crypto side as well. How do you sort of see the challenge that Ergo is going to be facing in the next year?
Well, we're going to have to see what comes, is the truth. There's two sides to that. The first is, what kind of legislation is going to be passed, and whether it's even going to make any sense, right? Because, some of the proposals that I've read are just not enforceable. And so then it's like, okay, well, good luck.
We see that with the sort of or potential ban of a self-custody wallet and a few other
Yeah,
bits and pieces.
you can't have a piece of open source software. Okay, how are you going to, how are you going to get rid of that? Good luck. Or even, it's like the micromanagement of society is just insane. It's saying like, okay, well, maybe you can't mine in your own home, right? And what if they take that, to like everyday appliances? How many watts is your hair dryer, and what's the size of the heating element? I'm the inspector, and what is this? It's crazy. Am I for like energy standards and quality? Absolutely. If something is efficient and it makes sense and it lasts a long time, great, it'll sell. The market will love it. If you can produce it at a cost where people can afford it. But when you get into like just the over micromanagement of every aspect of reality, I'd like to not live in a society that has that level of control.
Yeah, tells you what appliances you can use or when you have to have your lights on or off, et cetera, et cetera. How are they ever going to enforce something like that?
Yeah, it's not too realistic. And if you look at what it would actually take to enforce it, it's not a society I want to live in.
No.
So I have to say that, a lot of the legislation here in the US, it's very early. Like, people are saying, oh, well, it's a great draft that has to go through X subcommittees, and, it's then get through like the 11th hour, stick 100 pages on the bottom thing that we always do. And, we'll know what happens when it passes. So do I trust regulators to have my best interest? No. In all honesty, as a person, no. I think that even then I need to know my own assumptions and learn as much as I can, and, try to look after myself, my family.
I think that's one of the most important things as well, having that sort of mental well-being, just not for yourself, but your friends, your family, your greater community.
Yeah, it's what's important. So regulations, they could potentially have some sort of clarity to where, we have permission, but then again, we're supposed to be permissionless systems. So let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
To where you have some type of clear rules, which I don't know if the people that are writing the rules even understand what they're regulating, if I'm totally honest. I have serious doubts.
Well, I think we sort of saw that in the latest committee hearing, where some of the questions that were sort of being answered, were being asked. Like, obviously, yes, it is an educational purpose to be able to sort of learn more about the industry and things like that, but the decisions that they make have impacts throughout the world as well, being such a large economy.
Yeah, it's somebody's going to lead the market in terms of regulation, and I would say we're probably going to see overarching, overreaching, like power, trying to take position and control things that probably they can't anyway, putting in reporting requirements that are unrealistic, and basically close the market potentially, because one nice thing about open source code is, what's the barrier of entry? It's quite low. But then when you build in, all of the legal and regulatory complexity, the ability for some kid that's a very intelligent coder with a good idea and has passion about building something, but the actual barrier of entry gets so high that there's just like no way they can ever break through that space, is probably on the menu, if I'm honest, in terms of what I think. Jurisdictional differences are always like the one thing that has traditionally been good for crypto, to where, it's like it's sad, but it's like you have to hop into the jurisdiction that is favorable. And as long as there's value in the industry, I think there's going to be certain areas of the world that are going to be friendly because they have an economic incentive to do so. So to some degree, I think that economic incentive in the past is what allowed, Bitcoin to exist, even though the regulators didn't understand it and, at some points wanted to stop it. And, I think that same recipe of jurisdictional arbitrage is probably going to be the future of the industry. That's like, I wish I could sell politicians are going to pass something that's going to be great, CW. But, if history is any indicator of the future, at least in my lifetime, my experience watching things, I would say we're going to, have a lot of partisanism and possibly a lot of last minute changes. Tends to be how these things work out.
Yeah, I think that sort of ties into the jurisdictional side of things with the overreaching powers that people sort of might grant themselves. It's just going to stifle and drive out innovation into somewhere that is favorable.
And so that, my expectation is that may occur. That's something that if it does, I'm not going to be shocked. I hate to be like the pessimist here, but I do think that the requirements that will probably be stuck on our industry will kill the soul of it.
Yeah. I think also in that respect as well, crypto is really fast paced and ever evolving as well. So sort of how the regulation might come into it. The crypto, like the cypherpunk sort of side of things, will sort of drive the narrative, I think, in that respect, and sort of sidestep all the regulation. Obviously, being able to to develop so quickly.
Sure, you could use the example. It's like, okay, if we have to track everybody's IP address, scrape IP addresses across dApps, and dApps then have to report what jurisdictions that each user is coming from, and potentially censor them because of some geopolitical shit that they are not even involved with, and the application developers are not even involved with. It's, kind of like quarrel between countries. Yeah, I think that there will be a certain economic incentive, and you'll see some people that are like, okay, well, we're not quite a open and not quite a censorship resistant ecosystem, but there's some potential value in that. And then some people will see the principle there and hold the line.
Yeah.
Because, the internet has really changed borders. You're in Australia, I'm in the US. We have team members that are all over the world, distributed across borders in different regions. And, we're all kind of on the same team, all friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Versus the ability to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody from Australia, a decade, 2 decades ago would be kind of mind-blowing, right? But now it's every day. And it's not just me and you, it's citizens across the globe, to where, to some degree, that whole mindset of, like being insular and of one, area is kind of disrupted. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that we would build systems that are supportive of that, because it's our everyday reality.
Yeah, I think that's sort of really a nice way to sum up the greater environment that we're sort of operating in. Now, Ergo itself, we've got a nice, bright future, but obviously there's going to be a couple of challenges that we're going to sort of face in regards to that. Do you want to touch on a couple of sort of challenges that you see that Ergo is going to face in the next sort of 12 months?
Sure. I think that the macro environment, it may or may not improve. Again, we have to wait for the wizards to come out of their secret meeting and say whether they're going to raise rates or, cut rates or quantitative ease or, what, the quantitative tightening. We have to wait for their verdict, basically.
Yeah.
And that has global repercussions. Then that's not something that, we have any power at Ergo, nor does pretty much anyone else in the world. In terms of regulation, that is just an unknown. It's like an unknown at this point. We know that we don't know, what's going to happen, right? Who knows how that breaks down? And then we have the second question is, is there any way that we can simply maybe let's say that regulations came and they were just like absolutely terrible in the US, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe I'd have to resign, because I'm not going to encourage that in our ecosystem. That doesn't mean I wouldn't stop, doing these, or being involved, because who's to say I can't voluntarily participate in something I'm passionate about? But I may have to officially resign or something. Who knows? Like, so it could be very favorable, or it could be that, I'm just like the community member, and who knows?
Who knows? You're always welcome here in Australia, mate.
Yeah. So, it's something I wish I could sell everybody. The future is always bright and cheery. I think our technology has a huge use case to deliver real value, real economic utility, and get away from the just pure rocket ships and, gifts of our space, and actually start to deliver, counter economic value, person to person. I would love to see that. That's why I'm here.
I think as people spend a lot more time within sort of crypto, they sort of do see or realize that's what crypto is all about. They sort of get brought in with all this sort of hype marketing and Doge and Sheeb and all these sort of little projects that sort of are fun and promise returns. But then also the ones who sort of hang around are the ones that we want to sort of attract into the ecosystem, because they're the ones who ask questions, who want to make change into the world and drive all these sort of counter economic tools.
Yeah, hopefully they're tools that people can use to improve their livelihood, their businesses, their local environment. Like that would be a big win. So to some degree, I think that personally, and I could be wrong. I'm not, I'm not magic. That's why I'm here talking to you, and not somewhere I say. But my personal opinion is that if the market does end up splitting to some degree, where we have projects that are much more first principles oriented, being P2P, unstoppable economic tools to deliver value to the end user, versus we're going to track you, trace you, basically become a surveillance tool and pretend that we're something else. I think I know which side of the line Ergo is going to be on end of the day. So
most definitely, mate. I'll be over there with you.
Yeah. So I think that it's one of those things. These are not fights that we're choosing, so to speak, and they're not things that we ultimately have an outcome like that we set, other than to say, let's see and let's be ready.
Yeah, by all means. Something that we have to keep an eye on and just keep tabs on, and then sort of adapt as things are sort of made more known. Any last words, mate?
The reality is, say that again.
Any last words you want to sort of elaborate on?
Yeah, I don't want this to be doomy and gloomy, right? Because I do believe that the technology that we're building has the ability to have a profound impact to deliver value from person to person, right? If we have the right tools that are not built to kind of be temporary, vertical lines and then crash and are forgotten in history, and we actually build things that are organic, driven by use, and deliver value to the end user, and allow them to then come in and use these tools to build value themselves, and simply build out the P2P aspect of the network. We have a huge future in front of us. But we also live in a world where the decisions that have a global impact are made by very, 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 very few, right? It's a small group, and we're not in it. So to some degree, these tools are here to give people the opportunity to participate in a system where, within certain assumptions, they have the ability to resist being controlled, and that's powerful.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think Alex's voice in the Ergo manifesto sums up that nicely, being able to sort of
provide these counter economic tools for the everyday person. That's who he has at heart. And I think that's where Ergo's core sort of values sit.
Yeah, and so we need to always remember that, right? And even if there's $1 on the table, we need to keep to our principles. And not everybody will, right? Some people, there will be $1 on the table, and principles be damned. But I really think that's important for what we're trying to create.
Yep, no worries, mate. Well, we might wrap this up here. So I think it's been a little bit of a doomy, gloomy sort of video, but it's all something that we do have to face head on as well. It's the environment that we're in, and we have to adapt and move accordingly. Obviously, Ergo's principles won't sway, and we'll see you on the other side of that as well.
Yeah, CW, I'm not going to lie to you.
I hope you don't, mate. And the same thing's reciprocated. Sorry. Yeah. Cheers, guys. Well, thanks for watching this video with Armeanio and I. We hope you have a great Ergoversary. We'll see you in the community. Take care. Have a good one.